Nice to be here today. Thank you, everybody. For those of you who haven't caught one of my presentations at the past conferences, this is my third one. I'm based out of the New York City area, work for Sandline Global. We're an e-discovery services firm. I head up the forensics and investigations practice, dealing mostly with electronic evidence and anything from identification, preservation, collection through the analysis and expert testimony that's associated with it. Today, we're going to talk about the important topic of validation and how that applies to forensic tools, especially related to electronic data sources, digital investigations. Gonna do a brief introduction and then talk about how, tools have evolved over time, and then, the whole concept of maintaining and foundation of maintaining data integrity when we're doing forensic collections through analysis. In fact, the whole life cycle of the project and the processes that we follow all are based on maintaining data integrity throughout. And then we're going to talk about some best practices that my team follows that I'm going to recommend that your teams or you yourself follow, and then go through some also information related to how to build a digital forensic toolkit, and that could be hardware, software, actually, and then we'll do some time for Q&A. So a little bit about me. I have been doing this for a total of 23 years now. I started off teaching law enforcement, federal, state, local law enforcement in the United States, and traveled all around the country and was able to train about 1,000 police in my almost 3 years doing that. At the moment, like I said, I am the head of forensics and investigations for multinational forensics and investigations practice within an e-discovery organization. I've trained law enforcement, for a period of time. I still do that on occasion, where I offer training to law enforcement that may need post-certification or continuing learning education credits and things like that. I have multiple industry certifications, licensed PI in several states throughout the United States, and then an author. I've authored now a couple of books and a few different editions out on that second one, a selection of trusted digital forensics content. So you can check those out on Amazon and all your online booksellers. So this is an important topic. It's very close to my heart. I do a lot of writing, and this is one of the topics that consistently comes up in my conversations and in my writing because it really speaks to the core foundations of forensic science, which is my undergrad and graduate degrees. So, in terms of us collecting evidence in general, we always want to maintain the integrity. And what does that mean? That no changes occur to the source evidence while it's in our possession, while we're handling it. In fact, throughout the entire life cycle of a project, we sort of call that whole life cycle cradle to grave. And so we take into consideration any environmental factors, storage considerations, and then, to actually protect the evidence, the electronic evidence in and of itself, we use write blockers, which are hardware or software tools that allow us to prevent any writes to the source media, which would actually cause things to change related to potentially dates and times, files themselves, things like that. We also want to take control of devices when we seize them. So a good example of this is think about mobile devices, right? If you're going on an airplane or you're looking to stop communications with regards to radio frequencies or signals, you're going to put that device into airplane mode. It's going to allow you to still use your phone, but not communicate with any outside resources, essentially. We also want to make sure that while the phone is in our possession, that certain activities are not done on the phone. So no updates are going to be applied. And these updates, that we often see come across our phone, either for the operating system or the apps that we use, they could be done manually where you are prompted to say yes or no, do you want to do that now? Or it can be done automatically. The device is sometimes giving features where you can actually say, please download when it's available when I'm connected to Wi-Fi or mobile. So, in terms of um, our ability to control a lot of this. I mean, we live in a very technologically sophisticated world. There's a lot of fast-paced, things happening, and so we do our best to stay ahead of the curve. And we look at all the different ways that we could control the data while it's in our possession, because any updates or any communication that happens in the background may alter and impact our ability to collect the data and or access it. And it can also, in worst case scenarios, data could even be wiped remotely if, for example, somebody sees that their phone is no longer in their possession and they want to initiate a remote wipe. So, a very serious and important topic to discuss terms of, the evolution of digital forensic tools, we've seen a significant increase in the number of forensic tools that have been available or have made uh, the market, saturated recently in certain regards because there's been an increased number of data sources. When I initially started in the field, you'd have computers, you'd have network data, you'd have cell phones, you'd have all these standard data sources. Now, when I'm doing an investigation, we're looking at cloud storage, we're looking at email, we're looking at phones, we're looking at document management systems, you name it, it's all fair game now. And it's important for us to kind of not only connect the dots on how these devices or data sources were used, but we got to collect it as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And, these forensic tools have come about, to address the number of data sources that we're seeing. But there are also a lot of tools that are similar in terms of what they're able to do functionally to collect and even examine. But certain times examiners leverage different tools based on the functions or features or their ability to do certain tasks or processes that would enhance, or help a specific investigation. So, for example, I may choose one particular tool over another to sift through email or to search an indexed hard drive, because I know, how that process works, and I know the results in each, and also the reporting that is potentially available from each. So a lot of these things are taken into consideration when we look at what tools are out there to use and how we are going to go about using them. So we have now the ability to download directly from a lot of manufacturers' websites, if we wanted to start using a tool right away. But the question here is, do we want to use tools as soon as we pay for them and they're available and we have the opportunity to get them installed? And my answer here is it really depends, and it depends on a number of different factors. Whenever you download and or you get a new product in your lab or being used by your team, You want to answer one primary question, and you want to do this with scientific methodology, right? You want to follow a process by which you answer this. So we have a hypothesis, right? And we want to prove that. And the question is, does the tool do what it says it can do? So I buy a tool and I expect it to be able to do data recovery. And before I use that on anything further, I'm going to kind of think about a process that I'm going to use to perform this particular test. And we'll go through some of those kind of fields that I and the questions that I use and my team uses to answer this. But this general and important question, although simple, really has a lot of foundational value because it ensures that, the process that I'm going to follow in order to make sure that this tool does what it says it can do is accurate, it's reliable, it's defensible, and not last but not least, repeatable, right? I want to make sure that, if somebody else, specifically a member of my team or another forensic expert, somebody who I may meet in a courtroom situation on the other side, we're all using processes that, make sense, they're repeatable, and they're based on, scientific method. So I was kind of hinting at it before using this tool on live evidence or for a live case, we want to leverage known or sample data. You never want to do this on live evidence. And obviously there's some caveats there that, you have to make some decisions based on the circumstances. There may be exigent circumstances where, we have the ability to work closely with our forensic tool providers to maybe tweak the product to make sure that, a known bug or something is kind of dealt with, but we would still try to do some validation on the fly. But in certain cases, there may be a known issue, and in order to get this, because we may only have one shot to get our data, we may need to move forward with a process. But again, that's something that would require some, really executive decision, very special circumstances, and to be able to document why you took those actions. Now, in terms of getting a product or a process put into place that requires this validation, not only by the person who's going to think about implementing this for the team, but once it gets identified as a potential tool or tool that everybody is going to be expected to leverage, we want to make sure that every person that's going to be using this at a given time or whatnot is going to independently validate that tool. And it doesn't matter if the supervisor of the team says, "Hey, this is great. I love this." Everybody should do this independently so that they can see it with their own eyes. In fact, I've had tools that have been validated by others that in my own testing, I've also picked up on things that are important to maybe raise. So, this whole process isn't just about making sure that it can do what it says it can do. That's the objective. It's also about potentially seeing how the tool reacts and maybe coming up with some different ideas, maybe in terms of how you can leverage the tool, or just in general, just making sure that it's something that's useful for the matter, the investigation at hand. It doesn't matter if I've installed a tool today and, there's another update that comes out in short order because, there's a patch that gets, put out there by the manufacturer. Every instance of that particular, uh, application, product, tool, method, any change is going to have to go through this evaluation as well. And this is important because it doesn't matter if a small change was made, it could actually be a very impactful change. And this could be the difference between you seeing the data that you expect to see and not being able to see it. So we really have to take into consideration the time that's necessary to do this. We have to also remember that as we use these tools, as we use certain methodologies, we could be, we, and very likely will be asked questions about it in a courtroom, or we may be asked questions about it in a deposition. And the opposing sides and even our counsel, our client may go and look at user manuals and look to see about, how this tool actually works. A lot of this stuff is publicly available on, a lot of these manufacturer websites so that people can do a walkthrough of the product to learn about the features. So these materials, although they're out there and very specialized, they're discoverable. And so, that's really important to think about as well, that, this isn't just something that is done with, a checkbox and, you look at it for a few minutes and you make the command decision to let's use it. The challenge here for the industry, and we'll see a good slide and graphic to highlight and illustrate this to everybody here, is that you're balancing this along with other tasks that you have. So you have to make a conscious effort to build this into your workflows and to your operations for your team and your lab. If you're not doing validation consistently and for different versions of tools, you need to make sure that you put this in place, because again, if you're not investing in this, it could be that you get questioned and one version of a tool operates different than another version, and it may impact your ability to even see data that another party or the opposing side sees, and you're not talking apples to apples, and it becomes an issue. So in terms of, using these processes, to kind of come up with a workflow, you kind of want to ask yourself a few questions. Are you planning to use a forensic tool? What is it? What version of it is it? What's it going to be used for? And you come up, with some questions. Has the tool been validated by the team before? And, again, we want to test this or validate this tool on sample evidence. And then as a result of this test and the results of this test, we are going to move forward potentially with a SOP, a standard operating procedure. And that procedure is going to be written up. It's going to be reviewed and approved. And then we're going to leverage this tool for our casework following that SOP. And if there's any deviations, like I said before, which are inevitable, you always want to be kind of rigid in workflow, but you also have to be kind of flexible because of the evolving nature of evidence and electronic evidence, more specifically. So here's an example of a general kind of software validation form or whatnot that I use with my team. We kind of document it so that every version of the tool that we're looking at kind of is represented, the date that it was done, some information about the software, the license number, the version number. Version number is extremely important because it's very distinct. Every version has release notes, has specific features that may need to be considered when you're leveraging this and talking about the tool and how the tool presented evidence and things like that. And we also want to answer questions about the term of the license. Is it for 30 days? Is it for maybe doing a proof of concept? Maybe it's for a couple of weeks. How long does that license allow you access to the tool? The fees that are associated with you document it enough that you show that you're invested and you are taking into consideration a lot of key aspects of this tool, and you're putting a lot of effort into this to make sure that, again, it's doing what you're expecting it to do. We're going to put some information about team members or people involved, their department, when they started, when they anticipate to end, and who's leading this effort. And it could be one or multiple members of the team. Some information regarding the system that's being used, down to the IP address, the operating system, whether or not you're using a physical or virtual. And again, this isn't, so much related to a specific device or things like that. You're just showing how you're leveraging this tool, okay, across different devices and environments and things like that. You'll see here, we're going to talk about what our source data is, where that was located, information about, what we were actually looking at, the data size. You give a lot of metrics here so that you could really explain the results and, go through this with somebody. And everybody on the team is going to be following this, same process, or documenting this effort, and they're going to fill out this written form and or this record in general, and explain, what is it that you actually used and what did you install, what options were selected, what were your tests performed and observations. Was there anything that came up that you need to maybe follow up about? Did you follow up with the software vendor? Really important things. And then at the end, when you get your results and you compare it to what you anticipated to get based on kind of what the product says and what you're seeing, you can give it a pass or a fail. And then you are kind of checked by another member of the team. And again, this is something that is the responsibility of every person on a team, but the team lead needs to make sure that everybody is leveraging this type of process before using the tool. And on my team, when we are thinking about using a tool, we just don't download the beta version of a tool. Again, there may be a circumstance where that's needed, but we go through this process each time before either this gets installed on a centralized system or on a standalone unit, things like that. So some of the challenges that come up here, especially with regards to the digital evidence arena, is that our tools change frequently. I think you hear about it all the time, just in your own personal lives, when a new iPhone or Android comes out. There's an upgrade there. There's an operating system, an app update. Forget about phones for a second. We have Windows version 10 and 11 and discontinued things and things that happen overnight, which is pretty fascinating, where you could be the most prepared person in the world, and overnight, you're sleeping and waking up the next morning thinking you're going to go and collect from a cell phone, and then something changes on that phone. It gets updated automatically, and then you're not able to collect anymore. These are real life situations that I've done lots of testing before, and unfortunately I've encountered this. And sometimes the update is so significant that it really doesn't allow you to do what you needed to do. Worst case scenario, you fly out. Sometimes we can do this stuff remotely. Sometimes you have to fly out, and then this stuff happens and you've got to pivot. And worst case scenario, you've got to use manual processes. But again, this stuff does happen. And there's also documentation inconsistencies across different vendors. And really, what that means is, that you may have different manuals or different fields and different ways that different tools interpret the same or similar information. And you have to understand that and kind of roll with the punches there and say, listen, if I'm going to use a couple different tools for my project, I've got to understand, the lens of each my eyeglass lens when I'm looking at these tools to see how it's different and how it's similar and really understand how I can cross-validate my findings. And, I think if I was to just say that the data and the evidence that I found and I'm going to use in a case is based on my analysis in one tool, I have to really be confident in that tool and in my abilities to explain that tool. But if there's a high stakes matter, I'm going to leverage a couple different tools or a couple different methodologies in order to kind of make sure that I'm reporting on everything. Because one tool, like I said, may look at data a little bit different and give you different results or different formats or different way to look at the data, which could be particularly helpful for a formatter. Remember, features that we think are supported right now may be different, a couple of hours from now. I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of these settings on your phone to update when you're connected to Wi-Fi or, start doing things in the background automatically without your knowledge. And then, we have to make sure that we are taking precautions to preserve or ensure that the data that we are trying to forensically collect is retained. And these updates and things like that, putting things in airplane mode, being able to use write blockers, being able to use Faraday bags. These are all important things to take into consideration when we're handling electronic evidence and we're even transporting it. And we're very heavily dependent on our forensic tools across the board because things are changing so rapidly. We have to pivot, and sometimes we're relying pretty significantly on our forensic software and hardware providers to come up with patches or ways to deal with it. I mean, look at all the stuff that's happened in the news, where, that we've had some shootings and unfortunate events that moments later you start thinking about all the electronics and digital evidence that's associated and how quickly people need to move to try to get that evidence collected and preserved. Here's a visual perspective, and I really want to emphasize that as a forensic practitioner, we're juggling a lot of different things. We're working on multiple projects at the same time. There's a lot of changes happening in the background with operating systems, with file systems, with app version updates. So we have to manage all that while managing all our existing caseloads and our investigations. So we need to follow this validation and perform these validation processes to make sure that the data that we're looking at is being looked at with the best tools to do the job and we're not missing anything. So a fundamental aspect of the validation process is to confirm that it's doing what it says it should be doing, but also to QC to make sure that the integrity of the data is preserved and everything is accounted for and we're not missing anything. And then we can kind of move forward and, tell the story. So this is a visual perspective about how important it is to even move forward. We have a lot going on, and before we can even move forward with things, we've got to check things out, and this is what that's all about. This whole validation process provides a foundation for creating a digital forensics toolkit. Like I said before, we've got write blockers that prevent any data from being compromised, changed, manipulated, modified while it's in your possession, which is very significant. I've spent many hours on the stand talking about data handling and chain of custody. We use forensic imaging devices, workstations. These are all part of the hardware that we use, and the different components. And we want to make sure that we have all the proper components to work with the data and the devices at hand. Just to give you a sample of the number of the tools that you can now use to analyze, collect from different data sources, we're looking at cloud has, off the top of my head, 6 different tools that I accounted for, identified here. Computers, we have 6 different tools there. Email, 4. You go down the list. And let's not negate the fact that, all these tools each have a value in potentially the thousands to $10,000 costs for each one of these tools to have a license. So if you're going to spend the money, make sure that your tool is good for your clients for the project's investigations, but realize that the value here is I can ensure my client that I've got the best tools, I've got the most industry kind of standard tools, best of breed, state of the art, however you want to say it, that I can look at this with different lenses and ensure that no stone is left unturned. And a lot of these tools can be used for different types of data sources. So I may have the same tool that can work on cell phones, that work on tablets, or social media tools can also be used for websites, although a little bit different there. Cloud tools can be used for email as well, since they're all kind of up in the cloud. But again, this gives you some context as to how many different data sources there are and how many tools that we may need to use to effectively do an investigation. There's a lot of great resources out there in the space. There's a scientific working group for digital evidence. I'm attending the next meeting coming up here in the fall in Washington, D.C. area. There's also the National Institute of Standards and Technology out in Gaithersburg, Maryland. They actually are the ones that do all the accuracy for, like, let's say the time clock that we use every day around the world, things like that. So they have methodologies and tools that they've tested across many different industries and things like that to prove that the data from these tools and after analysis, how these tools interact with the data, what happens, what are the results, and whether or not it's a forensically validated tool. So it was great to present to you today. I thank you for your time. I personally have a profile online. I put a lot of digital forensics content out on social media on my personal website, Forensics by Freed. You can scan that link code and it'll give you my information. You can also find out more about my company and I by scanning the QR code there on the top right from Sandline. And I appreciate your time today. Let's stop the presentation and ask the audience if there's any questions.